Know me. I'm going to be talking about covenants as stages of growth. And I got this mostly from my Bible professor at the Swedenborg School of Religion, who probably all of you knew as George Dole. He was a he was a great friend and relative to many of you, and especially people here at this camp. And he was a great professor at the Swedenborg School. So he was my Bible teacher. So I took a lot of this from him, but I also came into the Swedenborg School from a background in psychology. So I kind of was looking at these 7 covenants that George had identified in the Bible, also with a book by Kohlberg on 7 stages of moral development, and also by another book by Fowler on the 7 stages of faith development. So anyway, I was coming from psychology, I was looking at how we progress through the process of spiritual growth. And that's really what the Bible is all about. As Kent mentioned, the beginning of the Bible, the days of creation, are kind of a summary of what the whole Bible or the whole process of spiritual growth is going to be. And then starting with Genesis 12, we move into more of the history of the Bible. And these stages, you could say they're stages of moral development, psychological development, spiritual development, or religion, because each covenant represents a shift in the way people experience God. So really the Bible is, when they talk about what God is, it's really how the people experience or understand God. And this changes throughout the Bible. So when God says, when things are going well for the people and economically or politically, they say, oh, God's rewarding us. We're really good. And then when things aren't going so well, they say, oh, we must have been bad because God's punishing us. And it doesn't mean God is rewarding or punishing. It just means that's how they're experiencing God. That's how they understand God. And we understand God differently depending where we are in this process of growth and development. And we can say how we understand God, but we could also say how we understand good and truth. What do we think is good? What do we think is love? And those things change as we grow and develop. So that's what I'll be talking about. So each of these covenants is like a radical shift. I mean, you could say we grow gradually, but then there's suddenly a shift in how we understand God. And it's also a process of movement from externals to more internals, from perceiving God and other people in the world and as physical and external, and then moving to experiencing them as spiritual and internal. And also, each step is a positive step forward, but although it may not feel like it. And so it's a positive step, but the only danger is we get stuck there. So that's what, like it's appropriate for a 2-year-old to be a 2-year-old. You don't blame them for acting like a 2-year-old when they're 2. If they're 12 and they're acting like a 2-year-old, then you say something's wrong. So each stage is appropriate at the right time, but we don't want to get stuck there. We want to be able to move on to the next stage. And one last thing about this before I go into these is that each stage, we go through them individually, just like a child growing up. We also go through them collectively as a culture, as a society. So in the early days of the Old Testament, the whole culture or society was kind of in an infancy stage. So that's one thing I love about seeing psychology and Swedenborgian theology, is that it's a process. We grow from infants to adulthood, and we go through these processes. And I'm also going to go fairly quickly through there's 7 stages on covenants or stages. I'm going to go pretty quickly through the first 4 and spend most of my time on the 5th stage, because I think that's where most of us are. We're either getting ready to move into the 5th stage, or we're afraid of moving to the 5th stage, or we're somewhere in that. So I'll skip fairly quickly through the first 4, spend more time on the 5th, and then the last 2 It's also hard to talk about because if we're not there, it's like talking about how we're going to perceive love or truth or God in the future, but we're not there yet. So it's, again, hard to talk about. So the first covenant is the beginning of Genesis 12, which Swedenborg says is the first historical chapter. Before that, the first 11 chapters of Genesis, he says, are more mythological and really just putting down the foundation. So the first covenant is the call of Abram, and I'll just read it briefly. Now the Lord said to Abram, "Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you, and I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and him who curses you I will curse, and by you all the families of the earth will bless themselves." So that was kind of the first time God spoke to the people, and he told Abram, "Go, leave your country." And one thing you notice about that is it's all promises. Just go, and I'll make you great. You know, you'll have many descendants, you'll have all this land, and you'll have great success. And nothing's being asked of him, it's just go. So it's all promises, nothing being asked. So this is like the first stage, a kind of naive innocence and trusting faith of a very young child. And it's also a stage of obedience. We trust that if we do what we're told, everything will be taken care of, everything will turn out well. And yet we're completely unaware of the effort that's going to be required of us. We have no idea how hard it's going to be. So Abram just, God says go, I'm going. And in religion, it's simply trust in God, no understanding. Developmentally, it's trusting our parents to take care of us. You know, it's just, we don't really know anything, we just trust. God will take care of everything, my parents will take care of everything, I don't have to do anything. Then the second covenant is represented in the Ten Commandments, and this is in Exodus 20. I won't read all those, it's fairly long, but these 10 commandments, which we are all familiar with, were given to Moses in the middle, basically, of a drunken orgy that the people were involved with at the bottom of the mountain. So he comes down with these 10 commandments, and first he's so upset with what the people are doing, he breaks them, and he goes back up, and he gets at them again, and he comes down. And this is the first time God is giving us rules to live by. We're being told that there is a distinction between human and divine, between the natural and the spiritual, between the inner and outer self. And this is a tough transition. It's like a rude awakening. As infants, we kind of just do whatever's pleasurable. You just automatically. And it appears as if nothing is being asked of us. And we're loved unconditionally. But now all of a sudden we're being told to be good, to control our desires, to do what's right. It's a world of thou shalt not. Most of the commandments start with thou shalt not do this, and some will be thou shalt do this. So we're being told all of a sudden, 1 year or 2 years old, we're being told thou shalt not touch the wood stove. Thou shalt not covet anything breakable. Thou shalt not take your brother's toys or cookies. Remember the nighttime and keep it holy, and that means quiet. Honor thy father and thy mother. And hundreds of other things are being told of us to either do this or don't do this. So it's a shift from hedonism, really just doing whatever's pleasurable, and blind obedience, to more a reciprocal relationship. We're being punished or rewarded for our behavior. We do what our parents tell us, and good boy, good girl. Or if we don't, then maybe we're punished. So we're becoming aware of good. We don't really understand what makes it good. We just trust that it's good because our parents are telling us it's good. We're supposed to do what we're told. So this is called the Mosaic Covenant. It represents a period in life when we're kind of frightened and insecure. We need outer structure and rules. We need to know what to do, because otherwise we wouldn't know. With each, so we wouldn't know what's good and what we're supposed to do unless we were told. So it's this young childhood. Religiously, this might be like fundamentalism. It's kind of all about reward and punishment. Just do what God says. Why is it good? Because God says it's good. We don't really know whether. We can't distinguish between good and truth at that point. But we trust God says it's good, the Bible says it's good, so it must be good, or our parents say it's good. The third covenant is in Joshua 24. And again, I won't read it. Where basically Joshua comes to the people and he gives them a very long list of all the things God has done for them. It goes on and on. God did this and he brought you here and safety and on and on and on. But now for the first time, the people are being asked to agree. It's presented kind of like a legal document. They're saying God did all these things and you need to do this, and they're given consequences. If you agree, then you really have to do it. You can't go back. Joshua's saying, you agree to these things, you agree to worship this God, to accept this God, and you can't go back if you agree. And so in a way, we're being asked to consciously choose what's good and agree to it. And so we're, instead of just doing what we're told or trusting that God or our parents know, we're being asked to really recognize the difference between good and evil, between truth and falsity. So this is more like adolescence. Where we, for the first time, we think we know what's good, and we can think about it ourselves, and we have to choose it. But it's also like adolescence, we think it's going to be easy. We think we can accomplish anything. It's like, I'm growing up, I'm going to be this great person. I'm going to do these wonderful things. And again, we have no really idea how hard it's going to be. We think we can just be whatever we want to be. And so we're going to make mistakes, and we're going to succumb to temptations, but there's no going back. It's like once we realize what's good, even though we sometimes do what isn't good or is wrong, we can't pretend we don't know the difference anymore. We can't go back to being a young child and say, I didn't know that was good, or I didn't know that was bad. It's like we do know, but we can't always do it because it's hard. It's like Reformation. We're working through the process. The fourth covenant is what's called the Davidic covenant, the time of King David. And he thinks God wants him to build a temple. And so he builds this great temple in Jerusalem. So this is a time when things were going really well for Israel. They're very prosperous. And so David says, we need to give something back. God has given us all this success and economic wealth, political success. So we need to do something for God. So he decides to build the temple. So this would represent adulthood. Maybe we've had a successful family or career. We feel blessed. We want to give something back. Maybe we donate to charities or volunteer with a nonprofit organization. We volunteer in our church. We kind of feel like, okay, my life has been good, and now it's time for me to give back. And the only danger, there are a couple of dangers. Like I said, you can get stuck in a certain stage. I think another danger in this successful time, is that we sometimes assume that what worked for us would work for everyone else. So we'll put that on other people. Well, if you just did this, you'd be successful too. And we can do that with religion too. We could say, these beliefs worked for me, so everybody should believe that. It'll work for you if it worked for me. And religiously, this might be more like mainstream Christianity. That people believe, yes, this religion works. It works for me. It's made my life good, so everybody should buy into it. Now the fifth covenant, which, first quickly before I go into the fifth covenant, which is a much longer description, any questions or comments on these first four stages? Yes?
Question.
Dean.
You mentioned the why didn't you mention the covenant with Noah, the rainbow?
That's in the first 11 chapters of Genesis, which Swedenborg says is mythological. Okay. He's saying that the Garden of Eden and the flood were kind of mythological, not part of history.
I see.
So those are the summary. Those first 11 chapters kind of summarize the rest of the Bible. So you can see the correlations there in those first 11. But then the rest of the Bible, you could say, goes into much more detail, going through these stages or these different covenants. Any other just questions before I continue? The fifth one I'm going to read also, it's from Jeremiah 31. It's really one of my favorite Bible passages. This is from Jeremiah 31, verse 38. Behold, the days are coming, says the Lord, when the city shall be rebuilt for the Lord, from the tower of Anan to the corner gate, and the measuring line shall go out further. Just skipping up here, the word that came to Jeremiah, wait a minute.
Yeah. The law is written on our hearts.
Yes, I'll start with verse 31. Behold, the days are coming, says the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and the house of Judah, not like the covenant which I made with their fathers when I took them by the hand to bring them out of the land of Egypt, my covenant which they broke, though I was their husband, says the Lord. But this is the covenant which I will make with the house of Israel after those days, says the Lord. I will put my law within them, and I will write it upon their hearts. And I will be their God, and they shall be my people. And no longer shall each person teach his neighbor and each his brother, saying, Know the Lord, for they shall all know me, from the least of them to the greatest, says the Lord. For I will forgive their iniquity, and I will remember their sin no more. So this is, I think, like I said, this is the stage I think most of us are in, either coming into it, or I think some in society are trying not to come into it. They're saying, this is too scary. We're saying God's going to write it on our hearts instead of on a stone tablet. We're going to know God, and we're not going to have to tell each other, God says this, God says that. And so some in society are obviously trying to avoid that, saying, oh no, we can't trust ourselves to know God, or to know the difference between good and truth and evil and falsity. So many are saying we can't trust that. We need to just go by what the Bible says, or what society says, or our church says. But then others are embracing this, but it's a difficult one, because you can't just say, oh, believe this, or believe that, or do this, do that. So I think many of us are trying to integrate, even if we believe this, how to integrate it and how to live it. So that's one of my favorite passages. And it's a stage of self-searching, maybe even self-condemnation, because after that feeling of success, maybe we had that successful period in life where everything seemed to go well, all of a sudden we're judging our lives by completely different criteria, and our accomplishments might seem insignificant or even meaningless. So this is what's called the midlife crisis. And it can be depressing, but it can also be seen positively, because each step might feel like a step backwards, but is actually a giant leap forward. We're trying to figure out what's really important in life. And we're looking at life in a much deeper and internal way. Instead of accepting society's definition of success, maybe money, material possessions, prestige, and so forth, we're going inward, contemplating motives, not just actions. Maybe we've been outwardly successful, but how are our relationships? Have we loved enough? Of course not. Who has? So we kind of dismiss all our success and say, well, sure, I was successful, but that wasn't important. We realize other things are really important, our relationships and our spiritual state and happiness and being of use to society. So this is a big shift, and like I said, it can be depressing. It's like the midlife crisis. All of a sudden, we dismiss our first 40 years and say, well, that wasn't important. In terms of religion, it's a huge shift. Instead of viewing morality as a list of rules or religion as a matter of belief or dogma, or as God as external. We're moving to see morality as doing what's loving, or religion as how we live. We're looking at God as a direct inner experience. So this is a profound shift, and like I said, I think the whole world is struggling with it right now. Because when you make this shift, there seems to be no way to even agree on what's good or true anymore. We see that, we can't point to it and say, well, that's obviously good or that's obviously true, because everyone's got their own idea about what's good and true. It seems to be subjective. So we can't just say it's true because our parents or teachers say so, or our religion or the Bible says so. And it's not that love and truth are subjective, but it's that we need to decide ourselves what is good and true for us. Swedenborg called this appearances of truth. So he's saying good and truth are absolute. Love and wisdom, that's God. We're not, but he's saying all we know is what he calls appearances of truth. We know how it appears to us, and that's all we can know. We can't know absolute truth or absolute pure love. We know how it appears to us at the moment. And the how it appears is not absolute. That keeps changing. And so in a way, we're even reluctant to say what's good and true, because we know it's an appearance and it's going to change. We can say what we're thinking today, and how can we say what God is? We know we don't really know. As Swedenborgians, I think often we like to think we know. So we say, oh yeah, I know what God is. God's love and truth. Yeah, fine. That sounds easy. The problem is we don't know what love and truth are. We use the words, oh, God's love and truth. Yeah, but we don't know what they are. Ask a child or an adolescent or an adult or an elder what love is, you're going to get completely different answers, depending on which stage of growth they're in this process. It can be, oh, it's being fair, or it's being nice to your brother, and so forth. And we still don't know. I mean, even as most of us are getting elderly, we still don't know. I mean, I know I have a better understanding of love and truth than I did when I was young, when I was an adolescent or a child. But I also trust that I'll have an even better understanding in another 10 years. I don't think, okay, what I know now is the truth. Now I know what love is. Now I know what's true. Like I said, I think I have a better grasp on it than I used to, but I don't know what it is. I'm still in that process of growth. Like I say, I hope I'll have a deeper understanding in the future. So it's kind of an exciting time, but it can also be difficult, because we'd all like to see gradual improvement. We grow, we learn a few more things, we learn a little more about love and so forth. But George Dole used to say that everything had to fall into chaos before it could reorganize on a higher level. And Swedenborg said the same about churches or religion, that each one had to fall into a state of vastation before a new church could form. So we're the same. We'd prefer to grow gradually in love and understanding, and we do for a while, but then all of a sudden we realize that what we believed isn't true for us anymore. Or what we thought was love actually had a lot of selfishness in it. We loved this or that person because of what it did for me. They made me feel good, so I loved them. Or I loved these things because it gave me pleasure. And so we gradually go into a deeper and deeper level of truth and love, where it's less about us, it's more about the other and the world and God. So it can be depressing because all of a sudden we realize, oh, I thought I was doing so well. I thought I was such a good, loving person, and all of a sudden I saw my ego pop up, and I wasn't really that loving, and I made mistakes, and I was selfish. And so it can be depressing, but then we can also realize, well, that's a sign that we're going deeper. If we realize these superficial things weren't really that important, well, that's a sign we're moving to a deeper, better, more spiritual level, because we're kind of not discounting, but we're realizing there's deeper meaning. There's deeper levels, and we keep going to these deeper levels. So it wasn't that it was bad, it was just that we can be even more loving, more altruistic, less selfish, So these are all just gradual things. So I'd like to just see if there are any questions or comments about this stage, because I think this is the one we can relate to more, because we're kind of in it, you know. Yes?
I'm Ned Rogers. I was just wondering if you think maybe some people are withheld from this stage because they might profanate?
Yeah, you could say withheld. You could also just say they're not ready for it. You know, like it's just like children growing up. It's not like a 2-year-old is withheld from being a 6-year-old, or an adolescent is being withheld from being an adult. They may not be ready for it. So all of these stages are good. I mean, you get to a higher one and you can kind of point to the lower one and say that's bad. Like a 10-year-old who says, oh, you shouldn't act like a 2-year-old. That's somehow beneath us. But a 2-year-old should act like a 2-year-old. But of course in this, it's moral and spiritual development, so it's not just age. You know, in developmental, it kind of mirrors the development. But physically, developmentally, we can point to a 2-year-old, and we know they're 2, so we expect them to act like a 2-year-old. But in religion or morality, it's the same thing. Some people are like children, and we shouldn't be necessarily criticizing them or saying, oh, they're somehow beneath us because they're in a childhood stage of spiritual development, and we feel we're somehow above them because we've gone on to another level. So I think the danger is you get stuck. You know, in some religions, or people even encourage you to stay stuck. They say, don't go there because that's too subjective and you're going to make mistakes and you're going to go to hell or whatever. So just stay in the safety and comfort of what we know. Stay with what we know. You know, that's kind of like fundamentalism. Stick with what we know. It's working, and you trust God and you do what you're told, and it works. So don't go beyond that. And yet, so it's scary to move on to the next stage because it's letting go of everything we thought was good and true, and saying, oh, there's something deeper, and I don't know what it is, and I'm going to go out there and try to find out, and I'm going to make mistakes, and I'm going to be sad, and I'm going to do all kinds of things wrong. But it's like an adolescent moving out of the house and going on to their own life. You have to grow up, you know, and it's the same spiritually, psychologically. We need to move forward, even knowing it's scary and we're going to make mistakes, and we're letting go of some of what makes us feel good, you know, that worked for us. You know, we think we were such good people, and all of a sudden we say, no, I need to do more, you know, and it's scary. Anything else? Yes?
This is Katie. I just wanted to check. Are we still in Jeremiah here?
No, well, it is Jeremiah, yes. That's the 5th one. It's because it's that process of that we're going to know for ourselves what, you know, we're not saying, yeah, that God is writing this on our hearts and minds, because basically we're being told we can, using our rationality, our hearts, our minds, our love, our wisdom, we can know what is good and true. But it's a very long process. That's why I say we're all just still in it, because yes, we can know, but then we're also going to not know. So we're going to think it's this, and it's not really that. Or we're going to think we have it, and then all of a sudden we realize, oh, there's another level beyond that. And we thought we had it. You know, we're looking for love and truth and peace. We're looking for all these things, and we grasp at it. We think we have it, and then we realize, no, there's something beyond that. So yes, it's still Jeremiah, because it's us having to figure out for ourselves really what is good and true, or what is God. Yes, Susanna.
This is Susanna. I just wanted to share that my call to ministry was very much linked to that giving back that you're saying, because I felt so grateful for my wonderful family and the life I have, and I had no idea how hard it would be.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. When we kind of glimpse the next stage, we think, oh yeah, just like a 16-year-old who says, oh, I know what adulthood is now. I can be an adult. You know, or a child, I can grow up, and yeah, you're right. You think it's going to be easy because you see, all these other people are being adults, so I can be one of them. And yeah, you don't realize how hard it is, and that's true, yeah, on all these spiritual levels too. It's not easy work, but we can't go backwards. and we have to keep going forward and not get stuck. Yes?
Well, actually, that was my question, Paul. This is Dan Dyer. I wanted to know, how do we go backwards? Because I'm kind of tired of giving back. Just kidding, just kidding.
You know, in some ways we do go back. We can't go back saying we don't know what we know now, you know. But in some ways, we always, you know, in one way we're continually moving forward throughout our lives, or the culture is continually, I believe, getting better over the centuries. But then there's blips, you know, just like we have our good days and we have our bad days. Some days we can be very loving. We feel we have a lot to give, and we can be sensitive to each other, and we think it's so good. And then other days, you know, I don't know, you wake up on the wrong side of the bed, or you have some kind of setback in your life, and all of a sudden you're having a bad day, and you're shouting at someone, or your ego comes back up. You're being less loving and more selfish, and so we all have our good days, and so we do step back. It's not like just a gradual forward thing where we can just say, oh yeah, every day is better than the day before. I'm getting better every day. Well, you know, not necessarily. Yeah, overall, I think we're getting better, but we step back. And same with society. You know, overall, I believe we're much better off than we were 100 years ago, 200 years. I mean, we can point to racism and sexism and all these other things, but you look back in the centuries, and racism and sexism were so much worse than they are today. It's like now we're aware of them at least, and we can talk about them, and they didn't used to even talk about it. Everyone just assumed this is the way it is, and now, yeah, we're nowhere near perfect, but we're aware of it, and that's why, and in that way we can't go back. We can't say, oh, there's no such thing as racism or sexism or injustice in the world. Everything's the way it should be, you know. It's like once you see these things, they're out in the open, you can't just, put them under the rug again, even though we haven't, you know, conquered these things, or we haven't integrated them completely. We're still in it. It may take centuries, you know, but I think we're going to be in this stage for a long time because there's so many layers to it. Any other questions or comments?
No, all right, you got me first.
Julie?
I just want to, on what you said about things, we all fall down, but what I've heard is if you feel yourself falling down, try to fall forward. So when you get up, you're a little farther ahead than you were.
That's right.
I wanted to add some humor. I didn't become a minister until I was well into my 50s. So I'd been a microbiologist for centuries. It was much easier for me, but maybe that's because it was later in life. My husband had wanted to be a minister, but something told him no, which was good because otherwise I'd been living with my kids.
Mm-hmm.
So at different stages of life, sometimes it's hard early on when you first, you know, have a real job.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, this felt like a labor of love for me.
Oh, great. Thank you. Yes, Herb.
My name is Evan, and I have, I guess, more of a question. Hearing about the covenants and then the wonderful correlation to our own personal development throughout our life, should these covenants or stages not be connected together at all times, so it's not like you're discarding the earlier one, but building on it?
Mm-hmm.
So that somebody who's in the 2-year-old stage or a 2-year-old is still doing the right things according to where they are. And then when you're in the later stage, you're not discarding those rules. Don't set the house on fire,
Right.
you know, rules.
Right.
Could you clarify if that's correct, or is there a discarding aspect?
No, there's not a discarding at all. I mean, we build on what we knew, and we don't stop knowing what we learned as a 2-year-old or a 5-year. You learn to whatever, share your toys and be nice to each other,
Right.
and play well together. You don't say, oh yeah, that's not important anymore.
Right.
It's just, or like in religion, you know, we Christians we kind of focus more on the New Testament, but they didn't discard the Old Testament.
Well,
You
that
know,
gets...
they didn't throw it out and say, well, that wasn't true, actually, and this is really what's true. They just said, well, it was meant on a deeper level. It wasn't meant so physically, superficially, literally. It's not that it wasn't true, it's just that we can understand it on a more internal, deeper level. And I think that's kind of the process of spiritual development. It's not that what we used to do was wrong or something. It was this, that we can, as we grow, we realize there's a deeper level. There's a more spiritual level, less physical. And so it's not like, oh, we were bad workers, we were bad husbands, we were bad parents or whatever. We did the best we could, and it wasn't that we were wrong or bad. It's just we're learning to be more sensitive and more loving as time goes on. So yeah, we don't want to look back and just criticize and say, oh, that was bad, any more than we'd look back and say, oh, I really shouldn't have been a 2-year-old. I should have skipped that. I should have skipped adolescence. You can't skip the stages. And in fact, you can't even understand the next stage until you're there. So it doesn't even help that much to say, oh, like tell a 2-year-old they shouldn't be a 2-year-old. It's developmental. As a parent, you kind of have to slowly introduce. You don't tell a child they're bad. You just say, well, think about this, or what about that? And because they need to learn and grow themselves. And that's the way it is spiritually. You can't just tell someone the truth and they're just going to suddenly accept it and jump levels. It's a very slow process of evolution. And yeah, it's not discarding or the past at all.
Thank you.
It's coming up. I want to know the last two.
The last two I can also go through. They won't take long because, like I say, it's hard to talk about them if we're not there. It's like, envisioning a step beyond where we're at. But they are the covenants here that George identified and are pretty clear and important steps in the Bible. So the 6th covenant is represented by the Last Supper. And there's 2 accounts of it, one in Matthew 26 and one in Mark 14. And it's quite long, and I won't read it. But in this covenant, as we all know, obviously very famous, the Last Supper. In this covenant, Jesus offers himself in the form of bread and wine to his disciples. And it's kind of like in the beginning stages. He's not asking anything in return. He's saying, take, eat, all of you. And so Swedenborg says, of course, the bread and wine correspond to God, which is God's love and wisdom. So we look at the bread as God's love, the wine as God's wisdom. And so we're literally taking God in when we do this. We're trying to embody love and wisdom. And this is what Jesus was telling the disciples, this is my body, take it, You be me in a way. He's saying, you be me. He knew he was leaving, and he's saying, you be me. Take my body and take my love and my truth and go out in the world, embody it. So in this stage, we realize that what God has been promising us all the time and what God is asking from us are actually the very same thing. So Swedenborg said that when we think about love, God is external. When we think from love, God is within us. And they're both equally true. We can envision God as the highest or the most inmost, same thing. But when we see God as within us, we act lovingly, or if we don't feel the love, then we need the rules and beliefs. It's like, it wasn't that those rules were wrong or these beliefs were wrong. We needed those because we didn't know what was good and true. And so we had to try to be good. We had to keep reminding ourselves with the rules, oh, do this, be that, be nice, be sharing, be forgiving, all these things. But when you get to this stage where you're embodying God, we feel love, so we act lovingly. Not because we want to. That's who we are at that stage. So you don't have to try to be good. You don't have to remind yourself of the rules. Once you really embody God, and I say we're not there yet, but once you do, then the rules and all that are not needed. And he's also saying we don't need to earn or deserve love or salvation. All we need to do is let love in and let it back out. So God is saying, here, this is my body, here's love, go out and act lovingly. So it's not like, do this and I'll do that for you, do that and I'll reward you, or do that and I'll punish you. It's just open your hearts as much as you can to love and go out and live it. And again, it's easier said than done because, it's not easy to let love in, and it's not all easy to be loving. And like I said, we can slip back some days. We can be better one day than another. Or there's the one commandment, a new commandment I give to you, that you love one another, even as I have loved you, that you also love one another. He's kind of saying if we could do that, that's all we'd need. We wouldn't need the old commandments and the old rules and beliefs. If we could really treat each other with love, feel God's love, that's all we'd need to do. But again, obviously it's not easy. So I think religiously this is the new church. And I don't mean the institution, the Swedenborgian denomination or anything, but what Swedenborg was talking about is a state of consciousness where we have an inner experience of God's love and we go out and act based on that experience. And this is, again, a very long process. This is, we don't just say, oh, we have Swedenborg's writings here, so now we have the new church. Now we're all loving and we all total understanding and forgiveness, The words are there, but so we know what we have to do in a way, but it's going to take generations, maybe hundreds of years, for the culture to slowly evolve in that direction. It's not something we can just read some words and I can't say, oh, let's all go out and be completely loving from now on, the rest of our lives. We can set that as a goal, but we can't really just do it, Stephen Levine, he was a Buddhist. He said he would sit up in his room and meditate, and he felt he was just in such bliss and loving state. Then he'd step out of his room and step on his child's skate, and he said he'd be back in the real world before he hit the floor. So something happens, and we suddenly snap out of it. So anyway, that's the 6th. Any questions or comments on that? Then I'll just. Yes, Julie.
Having served as a hospice chaplain and experience with people who are in the process of dying, that's where I've seen it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes, back here, Susanna.
This is Martha, and I want to say, I remember when I first joined the church, I came from a congregational background, and it was just Bible related, and there wasn't any deeper meanings or any, it didn't seem like a growth. I don't know what I did. Oh, I didn't think of any growth, but then I joined this church, and I kept thinking, I don't know if I want to learn anymore, because the more you learn, the more responsible you are,
That's
it's
right.
like taking a new job, Do you really want that job that's going to have more responsibility? And then I was thinking about you said about complete love. And I say my prayers in the morning, and I think, I'm going to be loving. I'm not going to say anything. I'm going to be kind and caring, and then I come out and my husband says something that triggers me right off, and then there I am,
That's
back
right.
in my old self. It's a whole lifetime journey.
It is a lifetime journey. You're right. It's not easy, and in some ways, I think some people don't want to be a part of a church like this because it is a lot of responsibility. It's hard work. You can't just say, oh, just believe this, and that's all you need to do. God, just believe this, you'll go to heaven, God will reward you. You don't really need to do anything else. Once you realize it's not just about belief systems and so forth, you realize, oh yeah, I have to do this stuff. You can read about it and say, oh yeah, I believe that, but that's like a little child said he didn't need to go to church anymore because he already knew he should be a better person than he was. And that's kind of that way. We know we should be more spiritual. And we can read about it and say, yes, be more loving, and be more open and non-judgmental and forgiving. But yeah, it's a lifetime process to actually do it. Yes, Sage.
You're setting my lecture up tomorrow up really well. I really am appreciating this. And one of the things, though, is just to remember that it is God growing us. I do think sometimes we think we're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And when we get caught up even in that we'll never get there, or we're here, it's so much work, you know, eternity is now.
Mm-hmm.
So I sometimes question whether it's going to take another 300 years. I think we can reach that state any moment, and then we go back to other ones, and we can have humility in it. But that is the love that's true. It's the most true state, and I've experienced it in all of you at moments. You know, it's so maybe not sell ourselves short or sell God short. That
Right.
it's been thousands of years since Jeremiah said that thing. So
Yeah,
maybe it is possible.
Yeah, I think it is possible, and like we can have extremely loving, good days, but then we fall back some. Well, not every day is that way, so it is a process.
I'm thinking Dean speaking. Dan said the thing about falling back, and I was a smoker for many, many years and quit many, many, many times. And whenever I felt like smoking again, I would go down cellar, and my kids would smell me when I came back up. Anyways, what I'm getting at is I fell back, and they would all look at me and say, "Why are you doing this? Why are you breaking the rules? Why are you hurting yourself?"
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, another thing about these stages, like I said, it's a process, so we shouldn't be putting ourselves down in some way because we're not further ahead. You know, a 20-year-old shouldn't say, "Oh, I wish I was a 30-year-old." And so it is a process, and we can accept that we're right where we should be. We're somewhere in that process, and that's exactly where we need to be right now. And so it's like perfect the way it is. It's like telling a 5-year-old they're perfect. Well, they are. They might be a perfect 5-year-old. That doesn't mean, okay, stop there. Be a 5-year-old the rest of your life. And we can do that with ourselves. We can say, yes, it's perfect that we're right where we are. And we're going to keep stepping forward. We're not going to stop where we are. We're going to go forward. Yes.
We have 3 minutes. Can we hear the seventh
Yes,
covenant?
let me go real quick through the seventh, and then if there are any extra minutes, you can ask more questions. And I also stay for the discussion afterwards if anyone else has questions and comments. The seventh covenant, I will read to you. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and the sea was no more. And I saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, "Behold, the dwelling of God is with people. He will dwell with them, and they shall be his people. And God himself will be with them, and they will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and death shall be no more. Neither shall there be mourning, nor crying, nor pain anymore, for the former things have passed away." Now, obviously, our church takes a lot of meaning from this, the descent of the holy city, New Jerusalem. And this is, I think, the collective, what we're aiming for. Again, it's a goal. And we could say once we are able to clearly discriminate between good and evil, truth and falsity, when we're letting God's love in, when we're acting from it, then we're ready to create the holy city. We're ready to create heaven on earth. So that we have to be spiritual people, and then we create a spiritual society. But of course, we can't wait until we're there to do it. You know, we have to be to have a perfect society, we have to be further along than we are now, but that doesn't mean we can't start now. In fact, we have to start now. You know, even Swedenborg called this acting as if. It's like we don't know yet what's absolute love and truth, but we have to act as if we do. We have to do our best. We have to say, this looks wrong. This looks unjust. We want to change this. We want to change that. And let's work on changing those things. And so we have to start acting as if we know what's good and what's true, because that's all we can do. So we act as if, knowing that we don't have perfect understanding, we're not perfectly loving, but we have to go out and try to start creating the holy city. We have to start creating heaven on earth now, even though it won't be fully actualized until we're more fully regenerate ourselves. Looks
Thank you so
like our
much,
time is
Paul.
up.
It
Thank you.
is. Please come back at 11 for those who would like to discuss the 2 lectures.